Hello and welcome to the I Am Woman project, where every week we have deep, thought-provoking and interesting conversations with thought leaders, change instigators, rule breakers and creative minds who think differently, sparking creativity and inspiration. Our special guests on our show cover a variety of topics just for you, and they share their personal stories to inspire, motivate and empower you, our listener. The I Am Woman podcast is produced for your enjoyment, and show notes are found at www.catherineplano.com. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favourite RSS feed or iTunes. All links are in the show notes. Now let's get into the show. Today we have Catriona Pollard, the Queen of Communication. Catriona has first-hand experience in moving from unknown to expert. She started her business with nothing in the sunroom of her rented apartment. She had to figure out how she could become a well-recognised expert in PR to drive sales for her fledgling business. Her transformation to an international speaker, TEDx speaker, popular media commentator and leader of a highly successful PR agency has been captured in her book, From Unknown to Expert: How to Use Clever PR and Social Media to Become a Recognised Expert. Is a comprehensive step-by-step program for the entrepreneurs and business owners to learn how to become a recognised expert and thought leader. She is also the founder and director of CP Communications, one of Australia's most respected and innovative PR and social media agency. She works with world-leading brands as well as up-and-coming organisations. In 2015, Catriona was named as one of the top 50 most influential women entrepreneurs in Australia as part of the Inspiring Rare Birds project. Catriona is also listed as one of the top 100 PR people worldwide to follow on Twitter. She is a highly regarded expert and media commentator in PR and social media, and her views have been internationally published in the media. So sit back and tune in and enjoy the show. Welcome, Catriona, to I Am One Project. How are you today?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about our conversation.
Oh, I'm so excited finally that we get to have you on the show. And I thought we better start recording. We're having a juicy conversation. So I thought maybe we better deep dive and start recording and maybe talk about some of the stuff we were just talking about. So we were speaking about your book and what you do. So would you like to maybe tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, and then we can talk a little bit about the book? That was awesome.
Yeah. So I own and run a public relations and social media agency, which is called CP Communications, where we work with organizations to help them get their stories out into the media and get them in front of the people that matter to their brand. And I also mentor people around personal branding and around developing their public relations strategies and so on. And I also have my book and products associated with my book, which is called From Unknown to Expert, where I help people uncover their stories and understand how to use public relations and social media to become more well recognized within their field of expertise.
Well, and what we were speaking about before, which I think is really important to, continue the conversation, just some of the things that you experience when you work with women. And we're talking about, our stuff that comes up, am I worthy? Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, it's the first stage in my book. It's star one of my book, which is sort of figuring out your why. And the thing that I found when I started doing this work for myself, I started my business in a rented apartment in the sunroom with a borrowed computer. I didn't have any clients. I had no profile as an expert. and I had to figure this out to how to become a thought leader or how to become more well recognized. And I really had to go through a lot of personal development because I felt that who am I? Who am I that am I going to be any different to anybody else? Are people going to think that I'm an expert, or do they think that I'm just going to be making stuff up? Do I deserve to be in the spotlight? And I really struggled with a lot of that because I'm not a naturally spotlight person, even though, I'm in public relations and I do a lot of speaking and, a lot of people know me. It's not around being in the spotlight for the sake of it. It's for actually finding a deeper reason for it. And I think that when I wrote my book, I was like, oh my God, is anyone going to read it? And what do people criticize me about it? When I started speaking, I was like, what if people think that I'm not a good speaker? So I had a lot of self-doubt around that. And I find that a lot of women really, sometimes we're our worst critics. We really are. And we have to get over this idea around comparison and comparing other people and thinking, well, I'm not the loudest person in the room, and so therefore I can't really step into the spotlight, and I don't like public speaking, and so I don't really have anything to say. I'm just kind of a boring person that just goes home, and I think that is such a shame that we really delve into that and just sit in that place, because every single person has a story to tell, whether it's a personal story or a professional story, a story that will help other people relate to them and relate to their own truths. So, I think it's really important that we're brave and we face those demons and we face those objections.
Yeah, I really love that. And I love the conversation we were having about the spotlight. Did you want to talk a little bit about your TEDx talk when you were talking about being in the spotlight? It's not about being in spotlight's actually being courageous and being brave. It's not about showing off kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think that we live in a society where like the loudest person tends to get the most media coverage. You think of those people, immediately that, with reality shows and so on. That's such a shame, because being in the spotlight is about finding your own voice and telling your own stories, but doing it in your own way. And it's not about being the loudest person in the room. It's actually about being the boldest person in the room. And understanding that being in the spotlight, for me, my realization was one of the first times I did, a speaking gig, a biggish speaking gig, and it was like 100 people in the room. And I was petrified, so petrified, because I have to do a lot of personal development to be able to do public speaking. And I remember literally walking across the stage and actually standing in the spotlight. And I've been so nervous. And I looked out across the room, and I just had this epiphany. I just had this realization that what I had to say had nothing to do with me. It had nothing to do with me being physically in the spotlight. It was actually about how my words and my experiences and my stories could transform those people's businesses. It could trigger something that would allow somebody else to tell their truth or to tell their stories. And it would give permission to people who may not necessarily have had the experience or the opportunity to be able to speak up. And so it wasn't about me. It was about how my words would float across the room into the hearts and the minds of the people. And for me, that's about being in the spotlight. It's removing yourself from the situation and understanding that what you have to say could really make the world a better place.
That's so true. I so relate to what you're just saying. And I think also being the loudest doesn't mean, I think when we were talking about being the loudest, it's just that obviously these people that are always in in front of whether it's magazines and talks and whatever there may be. It's just they're just being proactive, and I think that they're being courageous and bold, like you talk about.
Absolutely. And I was speaking to a friend the other day. I was on a radio interview, and this woman said, "Oh, I know the woman who does that interview, and she keeps on, talking." And I said, "Like, you really should go and do that interview because she interviews inspirational and interesting people." And I said, "You are just so should be interviewed. You're had such an interesting career. You know her, you know the format. You should just go do it." And she said, "You know what? I have never been formally asked to do it." And I was like, no, it doesn't work like that. You have to suggest it. You have to proactively say, "You know what? I'm really interested in being interviewed on your show. I've had an interesting life. I've had an interesting career. I'd love to be able to share it with your listeners." And that's how so much media coverage happens. It's not that you're being asked. It's not that the journalist wakes up in the morning and goes, "I'm going to interview Catriona today." It just doesn't happen. You've got to go make it happen. You have to be prepared to hear the word no as well. But you also have to understand that you have something to say and you need to go say it.
Yeah, true. So what would be some of your tips, because you've written a whole book about it, for an entrepreneur or a woman in business who can't afford a PR agency and have to drive their own PR? And let's say we're talking about someone that maybe not be as bold, that's maybe lacking that am I good enough, the whole self-worth piece. What would be something that you could, because you've obviously experienced it, what would be something that you could say to that individual?
Yeah, so the first place that I started, when I started this whole process, many years ago, I thought, what am I most comfortable with? So I know that I don't want to do public speaking because it doesn't, I'm too scared to do that at the moment. And what are my skills? What do I think that I can do? And so the first two things I did was go networking. And walking into a room full of strangers and telling people what I did, it was not comfortable for me. But I am, and I'm as an introvert, it was kind of I vividly remember the first time I went networking when I first started my business. And I actually realized that I'm a really good networker, and so many people who are introverts or aren't all that confident are really, really good networkers because they're listeners. And if you're a good listener, you're a good networker. And so I went out networking and I built my business through relationships because I realized that I'm really good at building relationships because, it just comes naturally to me. So that's absolutely a really great thing to do, even if you're not comfortable with it, because what happens is that when you go out and have conversations with strangers and within, business networking functions, if you listen to them and you're the question asker, that's how they walk away thinking they had a great conversation because they got to talk about themselves the whole time. So I definitely would recommend that. The other thing too for me is that I write every day. I love writing. And so I thought, well, how about I do some writing? And very, very early on, it's a very important PR tactic to do now because the way that the media landscape has changed. But I started writing about what I do. So, on my server, I have, like 500, easily 500 articles about every single thing that I do in my day and in my work. So I started writing things about how to do a PR strategy and sending that article to Marketing Magazine because I wanted marketing people to hire me as a PR person within their business. And I started writing articles about how to write a media release and sending those to business publications. And so I really started positioning myself as an expert because I was willing to give away some of my IP, some of my experience. So they're, really great things to start with. Start with what you're really comfortable with doing, what you enjoy doing, and then go from there.
So it's really working with your strengths.
Yeah, working with your strengths, but be bold. If you don't think that your strength is networking, but you kind of know, you have an instinct that you think that you should go do it, just go do it, but don't expect everything to change overnight. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and she's like, yeah, but I speak everywhere and I don't get any clients out of it. I don't walk away with clients. I'm like, well, this free speaking that you're doing is about building your role as a thought leader, and I get clients from people who've seen me speaking 2 years ago, and then 2 years later they remember me speaking, and now they become proper retained clients because the time is right now for them. So I think we need to think long term as well.
That's so true. And I think that sometimes we look at the big pictures to how we're going to get clients. I remember my mentor said, start with people you know. It could be like contact 10, 20 a day and just start building your portfolio, but start speaking to people that know you or that so you start feeling comfortable with your elevator pitch and your story, and then you can sort of expand externally and keep expanding until you feel really comfortable about what your brand's all about. So Catriona, what drives you? What makes you jump out of bed in the morning?
Oh, wow. So it's really about, I just love what I do. I really, truly love what I do. I love working with companies and entrepreneurs who understand the power of media and who understand that if they are working on building their profile and their reputation and their credibility, then it's going to make a difference to their business. And that makes a massive difference for me. And I really love telling my stories. So I write an article every week that relates to something that I've experienced, whether it's something like creativity or kindness or joy or how to write media releases and how to develop your personal brand. So I just absolutely love doing that because I know that people read it and then it actually can influence their business and help them understand themselves a little better as well. So, yeah.
Do you have a structure when you're talking about writing a media release? What's your formula so that it, obviously it's a very successful formula? What is that structure?
Yeah, so there's actually 3 things. If you're thinking about doing media, there's 3 tactics that work the best. There's one that's called the media release, which is a really traditional PR document, which, stems back from, I don't know, when the dawn of time when PR was invented. And with that media release, there's a really clear structure, and you can download that template for free from my website, cpcommunications.com.au. And you have a title, you have a lead paragraph, you include quotes, and if you're writing it yourself, you include your own quotes. It's written in third person. The only time it's first person is when you're quoted. It's a really formulaic document. The second one is called a media angle, and that's what I do a lot, mostly in my business. And so that's where we would pitch in a expert, so one of our clients, into a journalist, and we suggest to that journalist that they should be interviewing our client because our client can comment on whatever story that is. And say for example one of my team, because I talk a lot about play, because another part of my my work and my life is being an artist, where I do sculpture. And so I incorporate a lot of play and creativity into my business. And so he actually pitched me to a lifestyle writer in a Sydney Morning Herald that around being an expert on how to incorporate play into the workplace and into your life to have a more joyful, more creative life. So that's kind of, what you would do. And the third tactic is articles, where you write your own articles and you send those to online and printed media.
And if you don't mind me asking, How do you create more play and fun in your work environment? Because I think they're both very important, and I don't think we do it often.
We don't. And I think that what has happened is we're so caught up as being adults. And if you think about it, like my nephew came over to my, who's 6, he came over to my apartment the other day, and he wanted to play, my sister had taken him to see like a little kids musical. And so when he came over to my apartment, he was like, okay, let's be in a musical. And he used my curtains. He hid behind my curtains and came out in the curtains and had this and we just did this. And I just looked at him and thought, I have never looked at my curtains in that way. I have never looked at my lounge room as a theater, as a stage to actually, play and dance on. I've just seen it as a lounge room and my curtains to keep out the sun, And so I think that that's one of the most critical elements about play in our lives, is to acknowledge and to actually find playful opportunities. And so for me too, it's, my art is where I collect organic material like twigs and sticks and leaves and so on, and I actually create sculptures from that. And it's not around making the perfect sculpture. It's actually around having a look and seeing, well, how do those twigs interact with that stick and those leaves? And if I actually see the secret life in those, if I actually see them different to what they are, then I'm imagining them to be something different. And that really, really helps with creativity in my work. It helps me come up with new product ideas. It helps me come up with new strategies for my clients, because I'm, essentially using a different part of my brain.
It's actually quite grounding as well, because you're talking about sticks and leaves and, earth elements that are very grounding.
Yeah, it's so grounded. And I just, we're so caught up in this idea around that everything in our life has to make us happy. Our job has to make us happy all the time. Our marriage has to be happy all the time. This idea around, if I buy another TV, then that's going to make me happier. If I'm going to get that new shoes, then I'm going to get joy out of that. Whereas what I'm kind of suggesting is, how about we actually stop striving and searching for this happiness, this sense of play and this sense of joy that we had as kids was very much about, taking our shoes off and walking and playing on the grass. It was like the really simple things. It was actually, going out into the backyard and picking up a whole bunch of leaves and throwing them in the air and making patterns out of them. The very, very simple experiences. And I think as adults, we get so caught up in that, oh no, we've got to go and pay our mortgage, we've got to do this, we've got to do that, it's what's expected of me, and blah, blah, blah. And we don't stop and go, well, am I incorporating these other things in my life? Can I find joy in a completely different place that is so simple, and so far removed from, so for example, for me, how I got into this type of art that I did was that I realized I was getting really burnt out. I was realizing I was not enjoying my business. I wasn't particularly happy about a whole bunch of things in my life. And I realized that while I thought I was being creative, and even though my job is creative, I wasn't really using, that sense of joyful creativity. So I searched for something that I felt that I wanted, that was so far removed from digital, so far removed from computers, so far removed from the stress of daily life. And it's ultimately using, exploring basketry that is so grounding, and so connected to the earth and connected to this simple sense of joy.
It's so true. So many of us I'm going to say us because I know that once upon a time I was there too. We seek external of ourselves when we're looking for happiness. Like you said, we're going to buy a bigger house that's going to make us happier. When in actual fact, it's so much more simpler than that. And it could be as simple as creating that fun, and it could be as simple as playing with sticks or leaves.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And in my office, we all come in and, I have a room in my office, in my agency that's called the Inspiration Room, and I'm sitting in it at the moment. Couch, bean bags. I mean, and it's a small agency but I dedicated, instead of having my own office, I created this room as the Inspiration Room where we all come in. And we've done really playful things in here. I've taught people how to make baskets, and we eat cupcakes, and we sit around and we chat about things, and kind of just really removing that sense of stress. And I think that in a PR agency, it can be very stressful because you're on a lot of deadlines and you have a lot of juggling to do. But if you actively create an environment where you're removing stress, it really frees up the ability to see the joy that so often we don't look for.
Sounds like fun. I'd love to work in your office for a day or two. It sounds like lots of fun. So, Catriona, what's the greatest lesson that you have learnt?
For me, it was really about believing in myself. I've always had a sense of confidence, and I've always had a sense of self. But I think the older that I've gotten, the more comfortable I have been in just having complete faith and belief in what I'm doing is the right thing for that moment in time, and really being bold about that. Putting myself in situations where I might not be completely comfortable, really pushing the boundaries of growth has really been a really important lesson for me, because this is so cliched. I know that, but this idea around the growth comes when you actually put yourself in those situations. But I really believe that so many times we don't. So many times we do take the easy way out. And I think that's a really important lesson for all of us.
Oh, yeah. I always talk about it's about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. If you want to stretch yourself and if you want to do like what we were talking about, public speaking, I can't say I was comfortable with that. And I had to do lots of professional and personal development to get to where I am today. But it took that feeling the fear and doing it anyway and pushing through, because I knew at the end of it, once I got through all of that fear and anxiety of public speaking, that I would be able to share my story and make a difference. And I think if you take yourself out of the way, because I think we get in our way, it's like you talk about, it's not about you, it's about your audience. It's about making that difference. It's about sharing and empowering others.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But I also think, I was at a conference recently where I was asked to speak about passion and purpose. And when I did some thinking about that, I realized that for me, passion and purpose actually isn't about ending world hunger and, being the most, famous person in the world or whatever. It was actually the most simple things. It was about, feeling the earth beneath my feet every day, and about seeing the beauty in the world around me. It was my passion and purpose was really simple, because I think that sometimes we can get caught up in this whole idea around we have to be the biggest, the bettest, the brightest all the time. Where I think that sometimes we need to come back to the moment and actually say, well, what is it that I want to do now? I'm going to move forward. I'm going to take action. I'm not going to sit on the couch and wish my life away, but I don't have to be all things to everybody right now.
No, and it is, I mean, I just look at it, it's really simple. Passion is doing what you love to do, and your purpose is the how bit. You know, for me, my purpose was to, communicate my knowledge and impart my knowledge and share my knowledge and share my story and experiences. It was very, very simple. It wasn't big at all.
Yeah, that's great. And we just need people in the world doing that. And we need women in the world doing that. There are so many amazing women doing amazing things that that are inspiring, and that we need to hear about.
So true. So, Catriona, who's been your greatest influence?
Wow, I just have so many people who have influenced me over the years. Like I was really close to my grandmother. My parents have been a really big influence on me as well. It was very much about education. I was brought up, there was 2 girls in my family, and we were told we could do anything and be anything. And we weren't restricted into gender stereotypes. I was climbing trees, building fires by the time I was 5. We camped a lot, and we traveled a lot as a family as well. When I was 13, my parents took us out of school, my sister and I out of school, and we backpacked around Asia for 6 months. And that really influenced how I see the world and how I feel that I want to be in the world as well. So yeah, it's kind of people along the way, but I probably definitely my parents would be up there.
What a great experience backpacking at a young age for 6 months. That's
awesome. I had a tiny little 13-year-old backpack a 13-year-old girl could carry. I had to carry my own stuff. Yeah, absolutely. But I think that at that age, it was a really good time for me because I don't know, like I think that I didn't see the poverty and I didn't see the negativity. I just accepted it for what it was at that age. Whereas adults, we see all of that. We categorize black and white, good and bad. And as children, you're a lot more accepting of the world around you when you see different things. And I think that's really influenced me in how I actively choose to be in my life and choose to interact with other people. And I've done a lot of meditation and yoga and that kind of work over the years as well, which has really enabled me to, kind of see that grounding and see that there's other elements of play that play into our lives.
Oh, I just love it. Love it. So, Catriona, if you had to pick one word that best describes your personal brand, what would that be?
Inspiration. Yeah, so I love to inspire people and I love to hang around people who inspire me, whether they're my next door neighbor or whether, they're my nephew or they're, profound, experts. It's really about inspiration for me.
I love it. And when you're talking about inspiration, even your writing, social media, you're constantly inspiring people with your knowledge, with your wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, that's definitely a word that I come back to. And it's interesting because, that when I do personal branding work, that's what I do. The first step I do with people is figuring out what their heart and soul is, like the one word, which is their heart and soul. Because when we're doing writing and when we're talking and when we're going through this whole process of becoming more recognized as an expert in our field, we have to keep on coming back to, if I do this, is this true to my brand? Is this true to who I am? Does it relate to inspiration? Does it mean that in this situation, can I be inspirational or can I be around people who inspire me? So it does really allow you to have some framework around who you are from a personal branding perspective.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. A lot of the times when you're talking about being an expert in your field, some of my customers that I've worked with, and I hear them say that they're seeking for that niche, that particular market where they can tap into. But quite often they seek a a topic or an experience that they actually haven't gone through themselves, which is really interesting, because then they wonder why they get stuck and they can't deep dive into that niche or that market. And I always say it's so much more simple. It's just about, what are your experiences to share that story, your story, and it's about tapping into that market. So, for example, if your story is as simple as you've actually gone through a divorce, and you could actually be working with other people that work with people, it could be, marriage counselor, whatever that may be. But it's about, what are your experiences, and tap into that market, because people can smell you a mile away if you're not being authentic about your brand and your experiences.
That's so true. Absolutely. And so that's why that start one that I mentioned before, that figuring out your why. That's why I get people to do that work, and I suggest that they do that work, because people are going to know if you're doing it purely for promotion. And the other thing too is, somebody the other day was doing a TV interview, and the presenter asked him, "So what, where's your business going? What are you doing?" And he said, "So we're going to have 2,000 new sales by the end of this year, and we're going to grow by X%." And I said to him afterwards, what would you do? What do you think that maybe that wouldn't people wouldn't actually relate to that? What if you said, so what we really want to do is actually have customers experience a product that can actually help them with their business growth, and we're really hoping that we can work with so many more people to help them grow and become more profitable. So it's going to help the Australian economy to employ more people and to have amazing experiences." And he's like, "Oh, I didn't really think about it from that perspective." It's like, so if you come from, well, how can you help people? How can you change your world? And I'm not saying the world as in world, end world hunger. I'm saying just even it's the tiniest thing. People are going to relate to you. People are going to have that emotional connection with you, and people are more likely to buy from you if they feel connected to you. And they're not going to buy from you if they don't feel that they can trust you and that they're connected with you.
Absolutely. To me, that sounds like all you're concerned about is making sales rather than doing it for your customers. And it depends where your focus is. And mind you, there are lots of businesses out there that are focused on sales revenue, and and I understand we all have to make money from our business, but I really believe that it depends on your focus. I mean, for me, it's and I do a lot of free stuff as well, because for me, it's about making a difference. That's my focus. I want to empower people to tap into their potential, because we all have the resources we need. It's just about having somebody to show you how to tap into those resources. So yet I have worked with companies that it's all about, the bottom line. We need to make this many sales. We need to sell this many, products and so forth. And it's interesting. It's the focus is completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. And, those businesses that I would imagine the staff morale isn't particularly high. Yes. Because if you can create a culture with an organization that is about connection and about positive behaviors, and that they feel that they're contributing positively in some way, it's a much, much happier, more joyful place to work. And throw in some play as well. It's a much better place to work than, being worried about going into team meetings and going, well, how much have you sold this week? It completely changes the focus of it.
It does.
So, I completely agree with you.
And Catriona, play comes up a lot with you, which I love, because it makes me think that you're a real fun person to be around with. So what we do is we wrap up the show. We always give our listeners 3 golden nuggets. So what would be 3 golden nuggets that you would like to leave for our listeners today?
I really think the first step, particularly for women, is to believe in yourself. I think growing up, we do face a lot of challenges, and particularly in business. And so I think that it's really actively discovering ways to more fully believe in your abilities and more fully trust your instincts and understand that your stories are really important to tell. The second would be finding your joy. I think that we so often in the world that we live in seek external sources of joy, or we blame the people around us or the situations that we're in for not making us happy. Whereas I think that we are responsible for making our own happiness, and that, as you know, we were talking before, is finding just the simple things, looking up and seeing, you know, a beautiful sunset, you know, turning our phones off when we're walking down the street and looking around us and seeing the simple beauty around us instead of, you know, constantly searching for external sources of happiness. So finding your joy. And the third one is really very much about stepping into your spotlight. So understanding that you are an expert in what you do, or you're on your way to becoming an expert, and using the media and social media effectively to step into that spotlight and find your own version of how to do that's comfortable for you, and at times not comfortable for you as well. So the third one is definitely stepping into the spotlight.
Oh, I love them. I love especially finding your own joy. We do so often seek external of ourselves to find joy, and really we just have to tap into our own heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Catriona, where can our listeners find you?
So I'm all over. I'm everywhere. But so my book is From Unknown to Expert. And in fact, you know, your listeners, I just thought of that then. I'm happy to provide you a link where your listeners can access my book for free. They just pay for the postage and handling. So I can give you that link.
That's so generous of you. Thank you so much.
Well, yeah, and hopefully, you know, it means that your listeners can have access to something that they maybe wouldn't have done otherwise. And my website is cpcommunications.com.au, and my personal blog, where I talk a lot about the joy and creativity and innovation and so on, is catrionapollard.com.
Catriona, I can't thank you enough for your time and energy. I know you're a very busy woman. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your wisdom and knowledge. And I'm really looking forward to the book. So thank you so very much for offering that to our listeners. I'm sure they'll be very happy to hear that.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And thank you so much for spending the time talking to me. I really appreciated it.
Thank you so much, Catriona. That brings us to the end of another episode. I hope you enjoyed the show, as it is my mission to reach out and inspire as many individuals like you. And one of the best ways to help us achieve this goal is by giving us a good review on iTunes. It's easy and it only takes about 10 seconds. If you have any questions or special guests that you would like to hear from, please send us an email to support@catherineplano.com.au. and we will get right back to you. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook @Catherine Plano. That's it for now. Thanks for listening. Until next week, please take care.